Deep down, we all know it's true. We gamers, we ruined gaming. Because we have these crazy things like expectations, standards. Honestly, that word alone makes me shudder. Standards. Can you imagine that? We refused to eat the slop, to be happy about the slop. And thus we ruined gaming, obviously.
You know what's crazy? I would guarantee that if I asked the question to my audience, why do you think so many studios shut down? Why do you think there were so many layoffs? Why do you think so many games had failed? I would guarantee that the vast majority of you would be able to answer that question without any issue. But the funny thing is that apparently, well, everybody else is struggling to figure out that answer. 2024 was apparently the worst year in gaming. I know those incredible games that you played, those insane sales that we saw some of these games reach, those awesome indie hits that you play. Don't pay attention to any of that. None of that actually matters. What really matters is the layoffs and the mean things that people are saying on Twitter. We have journalists that are out there that are struggling. They are coping. They are grasping at straws, trying to figure out what happened to the industry, while at the exact same time, they are painting the audience as extremists because they didn't play the games or they criticized the games in a way that they didn't appreciate. You know,
At the end of the day, it's all about the fact that they are right and we should be wrong. But we kind of don't agree with that, strangely. But I do agree with one thing, honestly. 2024 has been a colossally bad year for gaming. And it's true, we have had some of the most amazing hits, honestly, in the last 5 years this year. But at the same time, I think DEI, woke, political messaging, and overall complete batshit craziness has also been the absolute highest this year. I also think that is probably not a lot of people are gonna try and fight me on that one.
one of the biggest threats that we have across the entire industry, this is probably the same for other industries as well, but it's especially true for video games, is that we have a lot of people that are out there that want to purposefully misinterpret what player criticisms or customer criticisms are for their own virtue or agenda. And it is having a massive impact on this industry. How many times have you guys seen somebody say something along the lines of, this is exactly what they said? And they'll put quotations around something, but they're implying what somebody said, not actually directly quoting them. This disingenuous nature of conversation, debating, and arguing just doesn't work, and it's falling flat with audiences, and it's ruining the product.
So a slight fix here. Quotation. He's not actually meaning quotations. Quotations are a quotation of text, but he's referring to three dots. Whenever you see a news site have a quotation, it's gonna have quotation marks. But if ever in a sentence you see three dots anywhere, they're probably misrepresenting what's being said, because those three dots allow them to remove or add even other sentences from other places. Yes, I'm not kidding you. They literally have the ability to quote people and construct their sentences word by word just by inserting three dots. Trust the media, they said. Sure. Yeah, I will.
Products that we're trying to buy. That's the reason why a lot of players are pushing back on it. I'm not going to pretend like this doesn't happen on both ends. Of course, you're seeing that from the players. Of course, you're going to see some of that stuff from the audience. But the critical difference here is that the players are a diverse group. Diversity in opinions and perspectives and life and money and all kinds of different things. And they're going to have
the good kind of diversity, if you can believe that.
Varying degrees of what their opinions are going to look like. And the difference between these two things is that the other side of that is an industry that seems like it is monolithically standing in opposition to its audience. But maybe I'm wrong. So today what we're going to do is we're going to find out why the players are the ones that are at fault for the fallout of 2024. As I sat in an airport waiting for my flight, excited to visit my family for the holidays, reflecting on how incredible of a year 2024 was for video games, I came across this article from TheWire.com titled 2024 was the year that the bottom fell out of the video game industry. From layoffs to the return of Gamergate, video games and the people who make and play them had a rough year. And
damn, most people just seeing this are instantaneously just gonna ignore everything that's said. Because, man, we have the layoffs. Think about 10,000, 15,000 woke lunatics that got laid off in an industry that literally consists of like 2 million people. Cry. Yeah, please just stop making me crying. I feel so sad about this. All of the talentless losers who got let go, all of the idiots who made such gems like Dragon Age, Veil God, and Starfield, they were let go. The tragedy. I mean, damn. And then we have the good old word Gamergate. That's a big and funny one. And man, what else they can honestly insert here?
Gamergate, video games and the people who make and play them had a rough year. And I thought to myself, well, that's a tad dramatic. I mean, yeah, we saw some massive layoffs, cancellations, and closures across the industry, and it was arguably one of the most divisive years in gaming. However, 2024, while tumultuous, was an incredible year across the board. Indie games reached unheard of heights, and independent AA and AAA studios dominated the entire year. Steam updated their policies to protect their customers from rug-pulled DLC and roadmap.
Dude, this is so big, and this is why Steam's gonna keep on winning. Because look at the companies that are currently doing good. It's privately owned companies. Companies that don't have to always have a situation where number go up slightly. And one of the big problems is the fact that number has to go up, but slightly. And this is why we're seeing all this, DLC slop, a live service slop, your favorite battle passes and things like that, because that makes line go slightly up, and that is really bad. While you have private studios, privately owned things that maybe maybe Tencent did give Larion some money, but still, it's a privately owned thing, pretty much, right? And the owner of Larion is the Sven Swink, or what's his name, and he gets to call all the shots. Okay, so they can afford to make something amazing that's gonna make line go up like this into the goddamn atmosphere, and that's good for them. Other companies don't want to do this because that's bad for them. That means bonuses are not getting gotten next year. That means their work is harder next year. Think about it. Turns out, by the way, even Space Marine 2, I found this out yesterday, is made by a privately owned studio. Yeah? All the good stuff currently is effectively made almost exclusively at this point by privately owned studios that don't have to worry about equity holders saying, I don't have enough returns on my investment. Big.
California forced publishers and studios to plainly state that customers do not own what they are buying. 2024 was a step forward for consumers, but apparently that isn't where our priority should be. Megan Farakmanesh of TheWire.com writes, for the people who make games, 2024 was a year of holding on for dear life. At the annual Game Developer Conference in March, Survive Till 25 was this year's incantation, summoned to keep morale on pace. Others resorted to full-on screams as layoffs in the industry charted record highs and developers found themselves under attack online for conspiratorial nonsense.
Wow.
In 2023, more than 10,000 developers lost their jobs. 1/3 of game makers surveyed at the beginning of the year reported that they had been affected by layoffs in some way. While there were some wins for labor organizers at big studios like Activision Blizzard and collective action around fighting for protection from the encroachment of AI.
Oh god. Again, I made this prediction roughly a year ago, but I said that the fact that Bobby Kotick left Activision Blizzard and they started unionizing and all of this shit, and they got rid of the toxic people, is the beginning of the downfall. And I think we see it, because if you're not following this channel, then you haven't seen the World of Warcraft videos. Their numbers are abysmal. The War Within is a fucking joke. It's not. Blizzard is soon gonna Blizzard is soon gonna start to collapse. Their numbers are just insanely bad. And there's not gonna be enough $100 long boys and Diablo 4 horse skin armors for $90 to sell to enough people to make up for the fact that they have probably lost again close to 50% of their player base for retail. Yeah, it is insane.
AI on employment, the industry's collective brain drain continued in 2024 as workers lost jobs in mass. 6 months in this year's layoff tally had already surpassed that of 2023. According to Matthew Ball, an advisor and producer for the games and television space, 2024's job loss count will wind up being about 40% higher than the previous years. The explanation is complex and wide-ranging for the same reasons the layoffs are so deep and continuous, and sit alongside many studio closures and even more canceled games, Ball says. Developers are under attack for conspiratorial nonsense, and they're trying to figure out why games are failing. You guys aren't seeing the correlation here? Let's look at the games and then look at the layoffs. Outside of Hi-Fi Rush, many of the studios that released games that fell flat with audiences fell flat for countless reasons that are pretty obvious to everybody else. Meanwhile, all of these publishers are investing obscene amounts of money into these projects. What do they think the recourse is for that money lost? When these studios and these publishers are investing $200 to $300 million into a single game, if not more, we're not even talking about marketing budget, do you think that Microsoft is just going to accept the hit for Redfall, that Sony's just going to accept the $400 million wasted on Concord, that Ubisoft, who's been unable to turn a...
Actually, you know what's the funniest part? He's completely wrong about this because they're going to accept this. That's the thing. This is big business. And in big business, there are no mistakes. You can't make mistakes. Are you kidding me? Do you think the fucking CEO of Microsoft Games Division, whatever his dumb name is gonna say, oh yeah, Concord, that piece of trash that we spent roughly $600 million on? Oh yeah, my bad. My bad, fam. My bad. Oh, not Microsoft, but Sony. Doesn't matter. They all do the same shit anyway. Do you think any one of them is gonna say, sorry, my bad, oops, I just lost you $600 million? Boop-a-doo. No, they're never gonna admit that. They're gonna find any fucking dumbass excuse ever to say that it's not their fault and it's someone else's fault. Because if they admit that they lost $600 million, damn, do you think, bruh, you think you're keeping your job? Fuck no! You're not keeping your job. You're not getting your bonus. Oh my god, not even close.
A profit on damn near anything for years now is somehow not going to have any repercussions for that? What's the conspiracy here? I am sick and tired of games media treating industry layoffs as some sort of surprise tragedy, conveniently ignoring the root cause that these companies failed to deliver on their customers' needs and the publishers over-budgeted on those projects and set unrealistic sales projections. The reality is simple. These players are not buying these games that are poorly made, uninspired, or designed for audiences that don't exist. Studios have spent years now chasing fleeting trends, pushing live service games that are riddled with microtransactions, and prioritizing their ideological messaging over the quality or meaningfulness of the content they're supposed to be delivering. When these games flop, it's no mystery why. There's no conspiracy here. This is an industry that's not under attack from external forces. It's sabotaging itself through greed, ego, and tone-deaf decision-making. You know, one of the other things that really bothers me is the special treatment that the games industry gets, the layoffs and closures. These aren't unique to just gaming. Every single industry is facing economic challenges right now because, well, people are facing economic challenges right now. The tech sector saw 141,000 jobs lost. Manufacturing saw 17,000 jobs lost. Retail, 4,800, and many more sectors saw the same. What is unique in gaming?
The numbers don't matter. Obviously, the numbers are going to seem big because, yeah, 10,000 jobs seems like a lot, but not really a lot when you find out that, oh, wait a minute, the industry consists of like 50 million jobs.
Is that this is largely self-inflicted. Companies like Ubisoft, Microsoft, Sony, and more have consistently wasted their resources on bloated projects, garbage games, ideological soapboxes, and live service games that nobody was asking for, while ignoring their core audience. These layoffs are the inevitable result of poor leadership and decisions that were prioritizing quick profits and ego over player satisfaction. Studios aren't failing because of bad luck. They're failing because they've stopped making games that people care about. As a customer, I'm going to be honest, I just don't care or feel anything for any of these internal struggles that these companies go through, especially when it's mismanagement to blame. The industry's decline is a natural consequence of treating customers like an afterthought. If studios want to survive, well, they need to stop chasing trends, stop alienating their core audiences, and start focusing on making great games. The problem isn't the market or the players, it's the industry itself. Please show me an example of a studio, a great studio that released a successful game, that performed well day one, that sold really well, that delivered and exceeded players' expectations. They prioritized the players' needs, and then they ended up having layoffs. You can't, because it doesn't exist, because successful games make successful studios, which keeps people in business.
Actually, I'm pretty sure you can, because there is a misconception in game creation, and it pretty much goes like this. Let's say you're Bethesda. You have like 500 developers. You make X game. X game is finished. Now you're making another game. And you're making that another game before the previous game gets even money because you're just a big studio. That next game is gonna maybe need 500 developers. In which case, maybe everyone stays, but maybe someone still has to be removed, get fired, or whatever, and someone else needs to be brought in because it requires more of this type of people with this type of knowledge. Maybe it requires 600 developers your next project, and you need to bring in 100 people. Maybe it's a smaller project because, I don't know, reasons, and you need to fire like 200 people because they just don't need all of these people to make this game. There are so... After the project ends in the studio, someone's leaving, probably.
Why are we conveniently ignoring the fact that the studios that failed this year and even last year, well, I guess this year's 2025, 2024 and 2023, were because those games didn't sell. They made games that players didn't buy, and thus they went...
Don't worry about that. I'm pretty sure some AAA studio is already planning a failure. I mean, I'm waiting for Assassin's Creed Shadows. Don't know about you.
Out of business, because that's just how the world works. You know, at the very least, I do feel for some of the developers that lost their job, because they're not the ones that are making the decisions that led to these studios having layoffs or closures. Because it's not your audio engineer, it's not your level designer, it's not your animators or programmers, it's the leadership at these companies. But I will say this, as an employee at these studios, if you guys are out there and you're making video games today, you need to be paying attention to your leadership, and you have to recognize where that ship is going. If you're working for someone that you know is not doing a very good job of putting a video game together, you need to get out of there way before those layoffs come out. There is no way that there aren't people that were at, Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League and saying, "Oh man, we got a game of the year situation out here." No, there's no way.
Concord unironically did that. They thought that they're the next big thing. They thought that they're going to surpass GTA 5. They thought that they're going to be the next Battlefield. Yes, Concord. Concord! A game that had like a 2K peak and half of those were developers playing. Yeah, I mean, insane people happen everywhere.
You thought that. You got to recognize and know what the consequences of a game like that are going to look like for a studio. It's not going to be good. When I read articles like this, what really upsets me is how they perpetuate this idea of entitlement, that regardless of the outcomes, that people should keep their jobs. It's not their fault. It is. It's a collective thing, right? We're working as a team together to make this game and put it out there. And, well, if it doesn't sell, you lose your job. Because that's just how it goes, especially with how much money's out there. And the issue is that when you start taking away, accountability, well, then they start looking around and saying, well, if it's not the leadership and it's not the industry, well, who would it be? The players. The writer continues with, as the industry faltered, games suffered. High-profile releases like Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League were commercial failures. While there were many reasons for this, online right-wing groups reduce it to a single mantra: go woke, go broke. By their logic, if a game does poorly and has even a whiff of diversity, be it regarding gender, sexuality, or race, that...
This is the... You probably, if you're a normal person, you're probably thinking, oh, they're lying currently about what the woke stands for. But no, a lot of people who identify as unironically woke have completely no understanding what we consider woke or DEI. They really legitimately think that any equality, any inclusiveness, any diversity, anything non-white effectively is automatically woke and bad. Yep, that's how they boil it down. Now, is that a straw man? Yes, but what isn't what they say?
Disappointing performance is the fault of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. Although there have been incredible games released this year, Balatro, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Metaphor ReFantazio, Astrobot, Black Myth Wukong, they couldn't distract from the troubles faced by the people making them. They couldn't make up for the fact that the meta-narrative of video games in 2024 was bleak. Ball says that the blame for this can't all be pinned to a single thing, like capitalism, mismanagement, COVID-19, or even interest rates. It involves development costs, how studios are staffed, consumer spending habits, and game pricing. The storm is so brutal, he says, because it's all of these things at once, and none have been really alleviated since the layoffs began. For indie developers specifically, the threat to their existence has been substantial. Dozens of small studios shuttered in 2024, though it's been difficult to get a full picture on how many indie studios the industry has lost, as they're more likely to shut down quietly without much fanfare or before many players even know they exist. With dwindling opportunities to get funding from investors and little cash to go around, developers sought alternative methods to get funding for their games in the past year. Some took bankrolling into their own hands. Among Us creator Innersloth launched an initiative to give fellow developers backing to finish projects. Others, like Tales of Kanzera Zhao developer Surgeon Studios, made their plans public in early development in hopes of attracting investments, all while fending off racist attacks from the anti-DEI crowd, making the challenges they're facing twofold. Even studios owned by tech...
What was Tales of Kanzara? I think we covered it for a minute. I kind of remember what that is almost.
Even studios owned by tech juggernauts weren't immune to the industry's contractions. Microsoft shuttered Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks. Sony shut down Firewalk. The latter shuttering wasn't wholly surprising. It's big...
Oh, it was this! Yeah, didn't hear about this much. I'll share the screen. Give me a second. You're probably gonna remember. You're probably gonna be able to figure this one out. You're probably gonna recognize this one second. Sharing screen. There we go. This. Yeah, remember this. Yeah, didn't hear much about this. It just kind of quietly died because, I mean, just look at this shit. Yeah, not that impressive. Not that impressive. It is what it is. And it just quietly went away really fast. Kind of hilariously bad.
2024 release Concord was largely considered a flop, but having a hit didn't give any studios a safety net. Near universal acclaim for Tango's Hi-Fi Rush didn't stop Microsoft's axe. It did, though, however, give Tango just enough juice to be revived by a new buyer.
Oh my god, I am so tired of people bringing up Hi-Fi Rush. By the way, this is the only game that has had a fate like this, but in like the past 10 years. You will not find a similar example. This is complete bullshit that they are even mentioning this. Let me explain the situation with Hi-Fi Rush, okay? The situation is very simple. Microsoft got Hi-Fi Rush, and they wanted to use it as an opportunity to break in the Japanese market. Hi-Fi Rush's only objective was to create a foothold for Xbox in the Japanese market. And it failed at that. It didn't do any of that. Their only reason for existence was that, and they miserably failed on it. Now, granted, did they sell more copies than expected? Yes. But does that honestly matter? We're talking about still an extremely niche title that sold more than expected, but more than expected is literally a couple of 10,000 copies, maybe at best. Which is not big for someone like Xbox. So, yeah. And for a giant like Xbox, it doesn't really make sense to try and go into something like Hi-Fi Rush all in just because it sold more copies than expected while failing to do the thing that they wanted it to do. This is such a bad example.
However, give Tango just enough juice to be revived by a new buyer. In other words, it's been a dismal year for morale. When developers gathered in Los Angeles for June's Summer Games Fest, developer New Blood Interactive bought out a billboard solely to memorialize their fellow developers who'd lost their jobs. We love you, we miss you, we hate money. It's just so performative and disingenuous, and it hurts to read. That line about Black Myth, Balatro, and Astrobot, and how the success of those games couldn't distract from the trouble of the people that were making them. Those employees don't have any trouble. They're chilling. They're kicking it right now. They're working on the game that they already made, or they're working on the next game that they're going to make. Having a hit doesn't provide a safety net. Hi-Fi Rush was a game that had critical success, and I'm sorry, but writers, journalists, and reviewers, you don't matter if the game doesn't sell well. It was a niche game. It was great. I had a lot of fun.
It did sell well. It made money and things like that. It actually did sell well.
On playing it, but it released on Xbox and PC Game Pass, a game that was largely played for free under a subscription, and the only game that people liked that actually came from a studio that suffered.
True, but again, it did actually sell copies, and it did sell well. It did perform better than expected by all metrics.
For a closure or layoff. We hate money. Yeah, it's obvious that they hate money. We've learned that by now. It's why they can't keep their employees or stay in business. They're making things for the sake of making them rather than making them for an audience. And that's fine, by the way, but there are consequences for that. And tell me, what is the purpose of sliding in these snide remarks about DEI like player reception isn't a part of this issue? This article's treatment of diversity and player criticism is a textbook example of bad faith argumentation. It dismisses legitimate concerns about poor writing, inauthentic representation, and shallow characters by highlighting some of the most extreme comments from a fringe minority, branding them as right-wing groups if they have any sort of criticism, chanting "Go woke, go broke."
To be fair, to be absolutely fair, that's not even a minority. But the point is, these people who made that article I am willing to place money on the fact that they just made it up. They didn't know that people say that. They didn't know. They maybe heard a fringe comment about that someone said "go woke, go broke" or something like that. They just make up shit. That's why people hate them. Because you can find so many examples where these game journalists are just flat out making up shit, flat out lying even when they know they're lying, or they're incompetent. That's it.
This straw man tactic is a deliberate attempt to devalue the opinions of players who want better writing and characters that actually feel authentic. When they continue to focus on these inflammatory remarks, the industry avoids engaging with the real issue. Players are tired of being sold half-baked stories and poorly executed characters that are dressed up in the guise of progressive messaging. Sure, there are some weirdos that are on the internet, but there are also thoughtful conversations about these issues as well. These criticisms that players are raising aren't about rejecting diversity, it's about rejecting bad diversity, forced, one-dimensional, inauthentic characters and stories that are meant to meet their personal worldview rather than actually serve the narrative. Players want nuanced, well-developed characters like we've seen in so many successful games. Take a look around. There are plenty of games with plenty of diversity in some of the most successful games of 2024. These writers are living in their own universe at this point. They were spewing nonsense about how Black Myth Wukong wasn't including women when in fact the game was filled with female leads in the story. Space Marine 2 had a black amputee and Brother Chiron steal the show in the final leg of the campaign in some of the most badass moments of the whole damn game. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's Barrett was one of the best voice performances all year, and that game tackled deep issues with parenting, adoption, and PTSD. Metaphor refantastic.
Well, that's because it's a remake, not a new thing, though.
Ezio's entire premise is around racism, prejudice, and more. What's even more glaring is that this article completely
Well, to be fair about ReFantasio, the issue that these people have with it is because it's about real things, not made-up things that are supposed to make one side feel good without doing any. So, kinda doesn't count.
disregards the massive successes that we saw in indie games in 2024, which contradicts all of their doom and gloom. Titles like Pal World, Enshrouded, Plucky Squire, Animal Well, Pacific Drive, Crow Country, Mouthwashing, and Manalords not only thrived, but they captivated audiences. They found their own audience with their originality, their authenticity, and their focus on gameplay over scope. By ignoring these successes, player concerns and why some of these studios actually shut down, this writer is doing nothing but painting an incomplete and ultimately a biased picture. They are so tied up in the virtue of their actions that they never take the time to think about the actions themselves. It's all about optics. It's all performative. It's nothing more. We have an entire industry that is so terrified, so absolutely terrified to just say that some people are bad at their fucking job. It's a...
Honestly, those two sentences kind of summarize everything in 2024 about gaming perfectly. That's it. That's it. You don't need to add anything. You don't need to remove anything. That is honestly all that has happened. 10 out of 10. How gamers ruin 2024. Big true. Legendary drops. Bye.